Today's episode is brought to you by Squeaky Cheese Productions, audiobook narration that's on the cutting wedge. Also, the audiobook Conversations, how to manage your business relationships one conversation at a time. To buy the book on Audible, Google Conversations audiobook Ivan Farber, but don't Google the one and only Ivan audiobook unless you want to listen to a fantastic story about a gorilla who, with the help of an elephant, pieces together his past. Hello, everybody, and welcome to Conversations About Conversations. On this show, we talk about talking, we discuss discussions, and of course, we have conversations about conversations. My guests today are people who record conversations for a living, Ralph Scott and Kendra Murray. Ralph is an award-winning producer with a get-it-done-with-a-smile attitude. He produces audiobooks, audio theater, scripted entertainment commercial spots, or pretty much anything within the live or recorded audio arena. Kendra is an experienced voice actor, narrator, director, and producer. Previous to her performing arts career, she was a nurse for more than 10 years. Please help me welcome Ralph Scott and Kendra Murray.
Thank you, Ivan. We're very happy to be here and having a conversation with you.
Mm-hmm. Being a professional narrator isn't like one of those jobs that when you're like 5 years old and someone says, what do you want to do when you grow up? And you say, I want to be a narrator. How did the two of you come to be doing what you're doing?
Well, I may not have been 6 years old when that idea came to me. I was a few years older than that, but I have always enjoyed reading aloud. And when my children were younger, they are now grown adults, but when they were much younger, I read in the libraries where they were at school, and of course read at home. That was a ritual in our lives, and I really enjoyed that. And I've always enjoyed creating character voices. The appeal for me in narrating versus stage acting or screen acting is that I don't have to memorize what's in front of me. I use the script that's in front of me. I don't have to memorize all that. That is a comfortable place. I really love getting inside all those crazy characters that are parts of the variety of work we do.
For me, it was more of an inner child thing. As early as the age of 8 or 9, me and the kid up the street, Louis Marinaro in Malvern, Long Island, would take a portable cassette recorder that my father got me, which to me was like, it was like all the world. I was like, wow, I hit the jackpot. And we would record mini radio plays. And one of them, I can't recall the plot, but I do recall one of the sound effects we achieved when we were trying to capture two villains walking through an alleyway, or walking through a sewer. And we took a dishpan and put about a third of the dishpan, we filled it with water. We placed it in a front-loading clothing dryer and placed the cassette player recorder in there, and then just splashed water in the echo effect. And at that point, I was sold on the whole medium. I was like, oh, okay, this is just the coolest thing ever, because what we got when we played it back did sound like two people walking through a sewer.
Where did the name Squeaky Cheese Productions come from?
That was me. So there is this cheese called halloumi, if you're familiar with it, which is delicious. And for anyone who isn't familiar with it, go find some. You'll thank me later. Obviously, this cheese squeaks in your mouth when you eat it. So that was the origin of this kind of quirky idea. Actually, something you really don't want to have your mouth squeak when you're recording, but we wanted to create a brand idea that sounded like fun, and that as a duo, we really do try to have fun with the work we do. It's a lighthearted look at a serious business production by just having a fun name like that. So,
although it also captures the essence of the perpetual dilemmas that narrators face, whether it's mouth noises, whether it's stomach noises, hint, hint, don't go into studio after you've had a lot of coffee, whether it is the ambient noise of, you can have a soundproof studio, but there are certain things like leaf blowers that operate at a certain pitch that are almost impossible to keep out of a mix if they're happening while you're recording. So it does point to this ongoing battle that we have with the elements in the eternal pursuit of the perfect mix.
What's it like reading other people's writing, or as I would say, their written down conversations? What's that like?
It is a daunting responsibility, and it's a lot of fun. Depending on the material, obviously, that will dictate the levity or the depth of care that needs to be infused with whatever we're reading. But it's really inspiring to get into the mind of a writer, understand what their vision is for the work they've written, and hopefully convey that in the intention that you bring out and in the character choices that you make for the story.
And sometimes for audiobooks, the author already has a built-in vision for his or her characters, right? That was the voice they were hearing, or voices they were hearing while they were writing it. But that's not always the best choice for the final audiobook. And there is always this sort of getting to know you and getting to know your character's moment before the actual production begins. We're doing that right now with a few clients where we are providing variations on character interpretations for all the main characters in the book, so that we can try to approximate what the author has in mind. But if the author comes to us and says, well, I really need this to sound like, and they name a major actor, that's not always the best call. And we find as narrators that there is that part where the author has to kind of like let us, push us out of the nest and let us fly. Because we may, in fact, I'd say 90% of the time, we will bring to the party something that the author didn't anticipate, and it takes it to a whole new level.
What are some of the books that you've narrated?
We're working on a few right now, nonfiction through to fantasy. So we're kind of in a spectrum of genre exploration at the moment. We've narrated noir, mystery, and some science fiction. One that I just did is called Girl Number 4, which features a female protagonist who is a detective. And she and her partner have moved from the Sacramento area to Seattle, and they're basically setting out to solve a cold case crime that lands in their laps once they arrive in Seattle. I really enjoyed the opportunity to stretch my acting chops, as it were, at the mic, in light that one of the characters in the book, who is a major character, has a facial disfigurement which affects her speech. So that was an interesting challenge to work with, and one that I hope that I embraced with sincerity and with integrity, in making her feel like a real character and not a caricature.
With that in mind, we did a project a few years ago, Death Among Us, which was an anthology featuring 10 authors, one of whom is deceased, but 10 authors who wrote in the murder genre. Every story, and each author had to do 2 or 3 stories that were progressive, not politically speaking, but in terms of the plot line. It required an extraordinary repertoire of accents and ages and stamina, because when you're dealing with murder, particularly if it involves young children in some cases, it really does shake you up inside. And to try to create that firewall at the mic, but still be emotionally transparent, that's some tough stuff. We seem to get a lot of projects lately that involve extraordinary leaps of emotional integrity. It can be very daunting. And, Kendra mentioned that we're taking somebody else's baby and sort of maturing it. Well, yeah, that's a daunting responsibility to do that. But we work in a lot of crime fiction. We work in, most recently, we had a romance that takes place on a dude ranch. We don't do much in the way of romance. We don't do any erotica. But that's not to say that we wouldn't consider it down the road. We've covered a wide variety of genres. And we're also doing nonfiction now. We've just completed a real estate book that I think has direct application to any industry, not just real estate, because the author provides a foundation for engaging in business that really is refreshing to read. And we're already starting to apply some of it to our own industry, audiobook narration.
Who are some of the authors and or books that have inspired you the most?
We love all of our clients, and I would hate to have anyone be jealous of anyone else. But we like that a lot of the authors we've worked with take some risks and either give the opportunity for the dual voice approach to really shine with the perspective changes in a story, or that just really bring in some kind of out there characters into their worlds that allow us to stretch our skill set a little bit more and draw from deeper places to get these characters out there, bring them to life. I really like when an author will take some risks in their world building and create characters that have depth, characters that have flaws, of course, we all do, and that have a good arc of progress throughout a story. Those things are vital. And so it's great when we are able to settle in with our authors that are presenting those challenges for us to take on.
You guys keep in mind, we're going to be with that project sometimes on the order of 3 months, sometimes even longer if it's like a 500-page novel and up. But for the average 300 to 350-page novel, we're going to be with it for a long time in a booth. And we've already read it at that point. So now we have to go back in and make it fresh and bring out as if we're reading it for the first time or performing it for the first time. So it always helps to have some really, really well-written material, which is why we tend to be highly selective, because we are going to be with it and rework it. And sometimes we have to redo a scene multiple times until we're happy that we've nailed it. It helps to have it first on the page in a really well-crafted way.
How many times will you need to record something if you have to record more than once?
You mean a scene, like a particular scene? Wow.
A scene, a book, what?
It depends on what's going on in it. Is it a technical issue that we have to re-record for, or is it a character buildup in the scene that something just didn't get presented right when we're listening for our edits? Usually the process would look like going into the scene, recording it as is. If it doesn't feel like it's leading correctly to the next phase of the scene, we'll immediately back up and bring that forward again, redo those lines in that dialogue, or we'll hear it in the edit and we'll say, okay, well, either that didn't sound quite right, or this line is actually said by this person instead of this one, so some of those kinds of things. So I would say maybe typically twice.
There are some issues with accents. When we have a project where there are multiple accents, characters that are engaging in dialogue back to back and are going through 2 or 3 or 4 accents, that can be an area where we spend an incredible amount of time, more so than we normally would, to try to bring out what the author had in mind. I think of a project we're working on right now, which involves more than 50 bird people, actually people who are birds. And these clans are divided up 4 ways, where they have British accents, French accents, Asian accents, and Spanish. And Spanish has like 13 different dialects between Mexico, South America, and Spain. So there's a case where sometimes the brain, while you're performing, slips into another accent that seemed more familiar. And you begin to discover, and we're certainly not the first people to point this out, but you begin to discover as you're doing accents that there's a commonality that sometimes crosses over or comes out in the crossover. And it's really easy, like, to go from Russian to French and from French to, and we have to be very wary of that. And when we hear it in the mix, we may not have heard it at the mic, but when we hear it in the mix, we're like, oh, we gotta redo that. So it happens.
Are you saying that you do all those different accents yourself?
We have no choice. I mean, that's part of that's on the page. So yes, and we spend a lot of time in training. We spend a lot of time on YouTube listening to the experts do particular accents, and we're thankful that they've posted this up there. But yeah, we have to. We have no choice. And sometimes it's a matter of, it can be an American accent. But in the case of the project we recently wrapped, Half Moon Ridge, there were 5, 6, 10 different characters from Texas.
So first you have to have a bird accent, and then on top of that overlay French, Spanish, Russian.
Well, fortunately, we don't have to have a bird accent.
It's a bird attitude.
A bird attitude, bird-like. The characters themselves have humanoid form.
Yes.
So
But they have
fortunately, we don't have to add in a lot of squawks and squeaks and whistles and trills. And that would be a whole different experience, I'm sure.
Although in our industry, they say that acting choices then choose voices, meaning when you get to the mic, you don't create a voice, you create a character and the voice comes. And there is a physicality involved in that. So in this particular case, the physicality involves wings. And the physicality, it's a good thing that we are now starting to raise chickens in our backyard, because we've been studying the habits, the physicality of chickens. And anyone who's watched a pigeon or a chicken knows that there's that certain movement with the neck. And we often tap into, when we're at the mic, well, how would that play out through the character as the character is speaking, whether that's in French or Chinese or Spanish or British. So it does impact, and it should impact. Otherwise, you're just a guy playing a bird speaking Spanish. Well, no, you're not just a guy playing a bird speaking Spanish. You are a bird person who has a Spanish accent, and that colors the entire delivery. And oh, by the way, you're at war with these other clans. So you're flying through the air and trying to defend your territory while there's a disease spreading that's taking out a lot of birds. There's a lot to think about, multiple layers.
I started listening to audiobooks a year ago with Veracity.
Mm-hmm.
I had been reading maybe 30 or 40 books a year, but I'd been reading, you have to sit down, find the time. And then someone said, well, Ivan, why don't you listen to your books?
Mm-hmm.
And if you want to read them, you can buy them or get them from the library and read them. And then I discovered my library had an app that I could anything that was available in the library. So I have listened to 136 books this year.
Wow.
Yeah.
When I listen, which is almost all the time that I'm not recording, I listen to audiobooks all the time. I want to be in that world, whether it's nonfiction or fiction.
Entering that world is truly one of the advantages we feel with audiobooks over other media, such as film and television, in that it requires that the listener brings something to the experience. Right? You're now creating those pictures. If we're doing our job, we are fostering that experience. But at the end of the day, it is the listener who is imagining those. And we would like to feel, and we've heard there is research that supports that there are parts of the brain that are being activated during the audiobook experience that are not being activated during a more visual experience like film or television. And no disrespect to those media, but there is something that makes we feel it far more intimate and engaging. So if we're in your head and we are putting characters there, that really does make the responsibility that much more intense, because we have to stay believable once we've passed through the threshold of your ears.
Yeah, you're the conversations in our heads.
Very much
You
so.
really are.
Yeah.
Not all books have audiobooks.
True.
I don't even know the numbers, maybe you do, what percent of written books are recorded as audio. But I would like you to be speaking to all of the authors that are listening or watching this right now and answer the question, why should an author have an audiobook?
The audiobook can be a big piece of the branding of an author's work. If an author is writing nonfiction about a subject on which they are passionate, they can reach a much broader audience by audiobook. In the day and age of podcasts, audiobooks are much more desirable and serialized audio entertainment. So the listener, the people out there are hungry for the content. And authors, I think, can really benefit by bringing that out either when they first put out the ebook or rolling things out at separate stages to kind of tap into different communities when they're ready to. But I think it's an essential piece of the branding, and whether that author narrates their own work, if it's nonfiction or a memoir, that's often appropriate, or whether they reach out and say, yeah, I wrote this, but I don't want to voice it. Can you guys please do it? We think that that's a market that they need to be actively engaged in.
And apparently we're not the only ones to think that way, because some of the biggest players in the category will take Spotify. A few years ago, they invested $500 million to acquire 2 companies that do podcasts and audio drama and, serialized audio or scripted entertainment, as they call it. So, when you get big guns like that into the art form, that they don't make these decisions lightly. And that they are looking down the road and saying, this is the coming age of entertainment. That certainly motivates us to keep going. But at the end of the day, the billions of dollars notwithstanding, we still like a really well-written story, because it allows us to just go to places that we've never been before. And, every story is unique. So that's why we love what we do.
Why in particular should authors work with you?
Well, we're kind of wacky. I don't know if they should.
Yeah.
We really try to have a synergistic approach when we're working with our authors. We want them to be collaborative with us. We do not want to have micromanagement of our work, the same as we will not micromanage the way they've written their books. We respect each other's domain. And we want to add some fun and also add a sense of realism to things that may be science fiction, fantasy, etc. And we believe that we can offer an opportunity for 2 voices to be in conversation in a book, nonfiction, fiction, and have the opportunity to present the characters with a different kind of dialogue than if one narrator alone is presenting everything.
Because let's face it, as much as I'd like to think otherwise, Kendra plays female characters a lot better than I do, and vice versa. So there is an advantage to taking either the duet or dual, and I'll explain this in a moment, but the duet or dual approach to an author's story. Duet, just so your listeners know, is 2 actors playing. Kendra will play the female characters, Ralph will play the male characters, and one of us will narrate the entire book. In the dual approach, not dual as in like 2 people holding guns at each other, pistols, but D-U-A-L. In the dual approach, it depends on point of view. So Kendra, if there's a chapter like in the book Kill Code by Luna Kane, Canadian author, very gifted Canadian author, each chapter was written from a different point of view, female, male. So in the dual approach, Kendra will narrate the first person point of view a character in that chapter, but Ralph and Kendra will play the male and female characters within that chapter. When the next chapter switches over to male point of view, Ralph will narrate the chapter, and Kendra and Ralph will play the male and female characters. So there seems to be a heightened interest in the dual approach, and we love doing it. It certainly requires us to be on our toes, because at some point the microphone is being handed over, as it were. I mean, we're obviously mic'd separately, but at some point the domain is crossing over to the other narrator. So it forces you as the character narrator in that moment to be on your best behavior, because you're no longer in control of the show, right?
You're clearly passionate about what you do. I would like to know, if you had to give your conversation that you're leading for the world a description, what description would you give it?
I would say alchemy is a description. As I said earlier, we believe in working synergistically with our author writers, and there is something magical that happens as a result of a good collaboration. And I think listeners can feel that. They know when the right narrators are saying, are relaying the story that they're listening to. They get that. They get when that feels magical. I know if you've listened to how many audiobooks this year, 100 and how many?
134.
Yeah. That you've heard that. You've heard that kind of magical, beautiful synergy. And that's what we strive for.
And alchemy is a really, really good analogy because we're all going for gold, right? We're all going for that elusive payoff creatively. And when we've hit it, and we know when we've hit it, and we know when we haven't. So that's usually when we have to go back and re-record. So yeah, I think alchemy is a fabulous analogy for the conversation of what we do. Keep in mind that we are somewhat restricted in our conversations because we're working off of a script. That's not to say that we're working off of a script when we are engaging, collaborating with clientele, but we still have to stay within the parameters of what's on the page to an extent, and then infuse creative embellishment so that we can now take this to places that maybe the author hadn't considered.
Now, you may have thought of this before because you have a very punny sense of humor, but with the idea of alchemy, I'm thinking like a tagline of turning squeaky cheese into squeaky gold.
Oh, I love it. Yeah, I love it, and hopefully run out and trademark that. Run out and trademark it. Yeah, squeaky gold.
Squeaky gold.
Going for the squeaky gold.
That'll be Squeaky Cheese 2.0.
Yeah.
But we enjoy puns, and we enjoy our clientele. We enjoy the projects we get the opportunity, and it is an opportunity. We don't lose sight of the fact that we're being given an opportunity with each project. And that's the coolest thing about this. And anybody in the acting profession will tell you the same, that every script allows you to explore something about yourself that you didn't know before. I would like to think, it's hard to say, I guess, but I would like to think that on some level, after the studio light goes out and we've moved on to the next project, that it somehow, by working with these projects, it makes us, it adds a dimension to our own personalities that may not have been there before, or we didn't know was already in us, that it took that text to bring out. And that's kind of a really cool thing.
I have a belief that we grow with every conversation that we have.
Oh, definitely.
And so I can really appreciate as you're getting into someone's work, hundreds, thousands of words, and the hours that it takes to do it, that you really bring that person into your experience and being.
Definitely.
So I think that's really very interesting.
Yeah, it's we're frequently approached by those who would like to get into the business, and we never discourage that because it just emotionally, and it's a tremendous payoff. It is not for everybody. It does require, we have a friend and colleague in the nonfiction arena, Sean Allen Pratt, who is famous for putting out there that, okay, before you take one of my classes, I want you to do me a favor, and that's take a novel of your choice or a book of your choice, lock yourself in a room for 2 weeks and read it every day for 6 to 8 hours. And if you're still able to, if you still have an interest in narrating, give me a call. And I think that's, while that may seem a bit extreme, it's pretty close to what we do.
Accurate.
Yeah.
It can feel like a monastic, I think is the term you use, lifestyle, in that, you are either sitting or standing, reading a story, reading a book for hours at a time in a place where you're often very isolated. So it's not for the faint of heart.
But you're not isolated in the sense that you're surrounded by a lot of characters, and making every one of those characters unique, but coming from one person or two people is when it really clicks. You're like, wow, I did that. That's cool. Oh, wow, you did that. That's cool. So there is a real tremendous payoff just intrinsically in working in this profession.
Well, I'm working on a second book.
Yeah.
Yay.
And instead of writing a book that eventually I'll record as an audiobook, I feel like I'm writing an audiobook that I will also publish in a written format and electronic format. but I have a lot of appreciation and respect for what you do, having produced my own audiobook in my house with no sound booth and always worrying that the heat would go on or the cat would squeak and meow.
I have a question for you, Ivan. As a writer and an audiobook producer and a podcast host, as you're approaching the writing of your second book, are you crafting it differently, having had the experience of delivering out loud the content of your first book? Is there anything changed about that?
No,
Okay.
no. When I wrote the first book, I definitely edited it by reading it out loud. And so most of the rewrites and edits were spoken anyway.
Mm.
I became intimidated by the process and cost of doing an audiobook.
Oh,
So we are actually 3 years ago yesterday that I launched the paper book.
Mm.
And it took a full 2 years before someone challenged me and said, Ivan, get with it. Like most of the books he reads were audiobooks. But when I do it now, I'm going to do it all together, like audio, paper, all launched together. But no, it wasn't. I'm a speaker. I've been a professional speaker. I would actually much rather speak the book, but doing things off the cuff doesn't come off the same as what I want to have as a final product. But along the way, I'm going to record sections and put them right on my podcast for people to listen to as I go, because I'd like to get feedback. I'd like to get more feedback. The written writing process is very solitary.
Mm-hmm.
And it's very hard to engage and get feedback from a wide variety of people when you're sending out writing. I might find that with audio too, but either way, you know that, okay, they might not have time to sit down and read it, but maybe they can put it on while they're driving to work.
Sure.
And then say, yeah, I got some exposure to it. Well, the two of you are clearly passionate about what you do. I'm very delighted to learn more about the world of narration. And I think this episode in particular will be very helpful to any author out there who's kind of on the cutting wedge of deciding whether or not to go audio. And of course, I know you are a resource, even if people choose not to retain you. I'd like to be a resource for people as well, having had the experience of recording with trying to keep the cat from making noise. But I do sincerely and with gratitude want to thank you for being a part of this conversation about conversations. So thank you.
And thank you. We really appreciate it. We really do.
Yes, thank you, Ivan. It's great to have a conversation with you. And I hope that your listeners will be more inspired to listen to lots more audiobooks.
And thank you for giving us an opportunity to get out of our 9-to-5 monastic lifestyle and actually talk with some live person. That's cool.
You're welcome.
Thank you.